and good evening. I'm Melissa Idris. Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. A study published last year showed that Malaysian children aged 6 months to 12 years are currently facing the triple burden of malnutrition, which includes stunting and obesity and micronutrient deficiencies. So the question we're asking tonight is whether we're acting fast enough to reverse this worrying trend. Joining me on the show is the Principal Investigator for Malaysia for the Southeast Asian Nutrition Survey that was conducted in 2019 to 2020. We have Professor Dr. Po Bee Kun, who is Professor of Nutrition at the Centre for Community Health Studies under UKM's Faculty of Health Sciences. Her specialisation is in childhood and adolescent nutrition. She's also Professor Po, thank you so much for being on the show with me today. Can I ask you to maybe lay it out for us? Just help us understand how serious this issue of the triple burden of child malnutrition is in Malaysia. What is the gravity of the problem currently?
Good evening, Melissa. So thanks for inviting me. Indeed, triple burden is a pressing issue. Especially, for example, in below fives is the stunting that is the most issue. The National Health and Morbidity Survey actually found 21.8% of children were stunted in 2019. And then they did another round in 2022 where they found that the prevalence decreased, but just a tiny bit to 21.2%, which is still very high. So that is a reflection of the undernutrition issue that is quite serious in the country. Now, for the overnutrition issue, data from our own CNUTS finding found that we have overweight and obesity close to 30% of the children. But these are mostly amongst the older children, like school-going, as well as school-going, both primary and secondary school children. Right. Now, in terms of the triple burden, so the third problem is the micronutrient deficiencies. And from CNUTS, we have data for anemia. Anemia, maybe people will call it like tak cukup darah, in Malay. It's below 4 years old, we have about 40%. So that is a very serious public health problem for Malaysia. And for the children who are above 4 years old, so CNUTS, we had children from 6 months to 12 years old, and below 4, the main problem was anemia, as we said just now. And above 4, the main problem is vitamin D insufficiency.
Okay. Prof, can I get you to explain that? So when you say 1 in 5 children under 5 years old are stunted or experience stunting, and then you have 30% of kind of school-going children under the age of 12 who are obese, help me put that into context. What does that mean? Why are we seeing stunting in younger children and obesity in older children? How does that fit into kind of the narrative of malnutrition?
So I think what happens is like if we do not grow well while we are in the mother's womb, starting from conception, okay, up to about 2 years old, one of the consequences will be stunting, but there is a chance for catch up as well. So if you catch the problem early and you feed the child well, they have a chance to catch up in terms of their stunting. But obviously, in about 21% of our children who are below 5 years old, they haven't managed to catch up yet. And that is why the prevalence of stunting is 1 in 5. And this is in below 5s, okay? Above 5, so as the child grows older, if we are a little bit short for our age, so even if we are not stunted, for example, and if we start to eat well as we are growing older, then the tendency is for our body to grow bigger sideways. So this is why the problem of overweight and obesity is more seen towards older age children. So CNUTS, we studied up to 12 years old, but in adolescents, the NHMS itself, the survey done by Ministry of Health, is also showing that secondary school children is 1 in 3%. So that is also quite high. So as a whole country, Malaysia, we are actually facing this undernutrition, overnutrition, as well as micronutrient deficiencies, where we call it, sometimes we say it's a hidden hunger, because you can't really see that. So if stunted, you can see that person is short, or overweight, you can see that person is fat, for example, but the hidden hunger, you can't really see that someone has anemia until you do the blood test to check whether they have anemia or not.
So the factors that drive the triple burden, is it predominantly kind of socio-economic inequalities?
Yes, that would be part of the reason, but I think the main factor, let's put it this way, is about our diet. So do we have, as a country, or especially among children, because we are talking about children today, do they have good dietary quality or not? Do they have access to good nutritious food or not? And this can happen, for example, let's say if you are poor, or if you live in very rural areas and you don't have access to good healthy food. For example, you go to the supermarket and nowadays everything is so expensive. So what you tend to buy might be the cheaper foods, and the cheaper food might be, let's say, something that is high energy, so it keeps you full, but is less nutritious. Yeah.
Okay, so talk to me about how the kind of school-based nutrition interventions are currently. There are some people who say, you know, these are insufficient for our children, but what do you think, Professor Poh? Are these programs effective? Are there areas where we can consider improving to address the triple burden?
So actually in Malaysia, the Ministry of Health as well as Ministry of Education, they are working together to provide good nutrition to the children. So we have Rancangan Makanan Tambahan, food supplementary program, as well as school milk program. And these, however, these two programs are only for the hardcore poor. At the current definition, families who earn less than 1,200 ringgit, roughly that amount. So which means that although we have very good programs where we can help the children to get good food, nutritious food, as well as milk to help them grow well, but it's only limited to the hardcore poor. What about the B40s, for example? They are not hardcore poor. Their families might not be able to afford good food, but they can't get the RMT and they can't get on the school milk program either. So that might be an issue. But at the same time, of course, in school, the school healthy, healthy school canteen guidelines has been around for a long time, which if the school canteen operator follows, it should be serving good healthy food to the children that hopefully they can afford to buy. But sometimes they prefer to sell things that children likes to eat, which includes things that are not allowed to be sold in schools. So this can only be caught when the nutritionists go to school for like monitoring or spot check and so on. Yeah.
Okay. You said something quite interesting. You said that it needs to be addressed even at starting from conception. So as the mother is, you address nutrition of the baby while the mother is pregnant, all the way from 6 months until 12, as you pointed out in your survey. How do we think about the most urgent policy interventions that go beyond just school-based nutrition programs? What do we need to do to look at more holistically to address the triple burden of malnutrition?
Yeah, so if you know, I actually tried to search for it online, but I couldn't find it. The Minister of Health actually launched the first 1,000 days program just recently, like earlier this month. And This is because of the stunting rate, basically, that is so high among our below fives. And we know that, so if we start intervention at a late age, for example, if you are malnourished from childhood, take just stunting as one example of malnourished. This can lead to, let's say, poorer cognitive development. So they perform not as well as children who are not malnourished in school. And because of that, their education level might be like roughly 1 year less than those who have good nutrition. This is all statistics done by UNICEF for us. So people who are stunted at a younger age, they have 1 year of schooling less than other people who are not stunted.
Professor, are you saying that so stunting and obesity, so it's not just kind of your physical development and your health later in life, it's also your cognitive development?
Yeah, so it influences, because malnutrition will influence everything, our body physical growth as well as our development. So our, like, children learning to move and their brain starting to function, to be exploring the world around them, all these are influenced if they don't get good nutrition when they are young. So if you have less education than others, then maybe your productivity when you are older, it will affect your income, and it will also lead to health consequences like non-communicable diseases. Now, the non-communicable diseases, like we know, diabetes, hypertension, and so on in adults, could have started from young, from children who are undernourished, as well as from children who are overnourished. So what we want is actually normal nutrition for people.
Okay, so a balanced nutrition. So for the parents watching tonight who are concerned, what advice do you have for them?
So the first 1,000 days program that was launched by the minister just earlier this month, it is saying that we should teach women of reproductive age, which means starting from as early as 15, or if that's too young, just let's say about a year before you get pregnant, you need to make sure you get well nourished, so that when you get pregnant, you have a good, healthy baby, even while in the womb already. So, and then as they are born, to breastfeed them, and then to give them good complementary feeding when they reach about 6 months of age. So taking care of good nutrition in the first 2 years of life is very important to prevent malnutrition a little bit later on in life. Yeah. Right. So that's very important. Yeah.
Professor, thank you so much for speaking with me. I appreciate your insights. That was Professor Dr. Poh Bee Khun from UKM's Faculty of Health Sciences. We're going to take a quick break here, and we're going to be back with more on Consider This, so stay tuned. Hi, welcome back to Consider This. I'm Melissa Idris. Let's continue the discussion about the increasing prevalence of the triple burden of child malnutrition in Malaysia, the coexistence of stunting, obesity, and micronutrient deficiencies in children. Joining us now is consultant pediatrician Dr. Musa Nordin. Dr. Musa, thank you for being on the show with me today. I appreciate it. Your experience as a pediatrician, I'm just wondering, what have you observed over the years? How often do you encounter the effects of this triple burden of child malnutrition? How has it kind of evolved in recent years?
Probably my colleague has mentioned about the frequency of stunting, underweight, and wasted children, and the overnutrition of being obese. Yeah, and the impact is considerable, because acutely, yeah, the complications may include that they are not performing as well, yeah, as children. Yeah, their developmental milestones are delayed. Up to 7% of these children actually may have issues with gross motor development, fine motor development. They don't socialize as well, and some of them may actually have problems with speech, yeah, or hearing. And because they do not have the right micronutrients, the right proteins, carbohydrate, and fats, they are at higher risk of developing infections. And because their immunity is compromised. And when you get infections, you further retard the growth and development of the child. And being obese or being wasted, they have issues in school, they are stigmatized, they are bullied, and you have mental issues with these children. And of course, you get underperforming in their school. Those are acute issues that we face.
Dr. Musa, can I ask you, can the effects of the triple burden be reversed later in life? It happens as we said, so we learned that stunting happens even from conception, even or the issues of nutrition happens from conception through gestation and the first 1,000 days of birth. So how do we think about that? Can the effects be reversed later in life once we have grown up a little bit more?
The effects of stunting can be considerable. The long-term effects, yeah, more NCDs, yeah, more frequent hospitalizations, and of course productivity is decreased, and that would affect the GDP of the country. Yeah, they become sicker, they become stunted adults. And can you imagine if a stunted mother, a stunted child becomes a malnourished girl and then becomes a small mother, and then she delivers a tiny baby, a low birth weight baby. In Malaysia, it's about 10%. But if we address it preferably within the first 100,000 days, we can reverse many of these acute and chronic complications of stunting. And that means, like what our good professor has mentioned, making sure that they have the right early feeding, addressing it from in the womb itself. Making sure mom gets good antenatal care, good nutrition. We address complications of diabetes in pregnancy, which is actually increased double. The issues of pregnancy-induced hypertension, which also increase over the years. If this can be addressed, then hopefully she delivers not a low birth weight babies. That's about 10% in Malaysia. It's too high. Developed countries, it is less than 2%. Yeah. So yes, if we address it earlier, we can reverse all of the acute and chronic complications.
Okay. How do we think about that? The first 1,000 days of life. What policy interventions are needed to give our children the best chance possible?
Okay. First, with the mother, we discussed it briefly. Address her issues in terms of making sure that she is well fed, she gets the balanced nutrition. When she is pregnant, she's seen by a doctor for her antenatal care, and all these myths and traditions needs to be demystified. And then for the baby, I think the best start in life is still breastfeeding. Right? Breastfeeding not only ensures optimum nutrition, it also gives an added 10 IQ scores for the child, because it's got lots of antibodies that protects the child from infection, that does not compromise his growth. And then make sure when the child goes, it gets the right amount of complementary foods, and then when the family is enjoying dinner, for those between 2 to 5 years old, they get the right nutrition. Yeah. And when they go to school, I have actually made this, me and my colleagues have actually proposed for Belanjawan 2025 to make sure that kids get free school meals, pre-primary and in school. Yeah. Because can you imagine, only 30% of our kids get breakfast before they go to school. Some of them go to school at 6, 7 a.m. Mom is not even ready to prepare breakfast, and there is no appetite for breakfast. 60% may or may not get a breakfast, and 10% never actually get a breakfast. So I think with a free school plan, I think we can address some of these issues.
So the school plan, the school food plan is interesting, but all the others from, kind of prenatal, antenatal, all the other child nutrition and child well-being healthcare, is that not happening currently? I mean, where are we falling short that this triple burden issue is such a problem?
Gaps there. That
Where
is
are the
why
gaps?
my message to the healthcare provider is that we need to pick up the risk factors and identify these children. And then we intervene, right? And then we monitor, and then we optimize the plan, right? So that they get the right nutrition, and then that the development is not retarded. So I think that in terms of the implementation, there is much that needs to be done.
Okay, well, where do you see the challenges? I mean, your proposal for kind of free school meals, your proposal for having more intervention from healthcare providers themselves. Where do you see the most significant challenges in curbing malnutrition if we no longer want this to happen to the next generation? We don't want the next generation to be stunted and to be overweight.
That's a $1 million question. But first, my message is this. We need to deal with the social determinants. This is a government agenda, yeah? Because 60% of the health outcomes in the health of Malaysia are determined by social determinants, i.e., you need to eliminate poverty, you need to make sure that they have a job, you need to make sure that housing is optimized, sanitation is good, that there is a social security net, there is food security. We had issues during the pandemic. This needs to be sorted out. And then teaching parents to recognize this red flags. Yeah, can you imagine our children, 13% of them obesity, and 80% of parents do not realize that the child is obese. So this is educating, health education. Yeah. So I think that's a challenge itself. And then, of course, the ministry needs to prioritize the wellness paradigm. At this point in time, can you imagine? I think this 2019 data, 68% of the monies that spent is curative. I mean, so we need healthcare is health first, then care. And the benchmark to me of the moral duty of any government is to make sure that the most vulnerable, those at the dawn of life, children, are taken care of, because they are the future of the nation. We have to invest in their wealth. And finally, for the Minister of Health, do you realize that only 1% of your budget is spent on child health?
So I was actually going to ask you whether we know how much money is invested in kind of child health and well-being, and what it's being invested in. Do you know what it is that we're spending money on, and where we should be spending money?
We should be spending money on preventative strategies, public health that make sure that the child grows optimally, the child develops optimally, right? And this is where this proposal to Belanjawan, Minister of Finance, 2025, is to make sure that our youngest and most vulnerable are fed well, because then they get good nutrition, good development, and they become productive. That's important. And not only that, we sent another Belanjawan request 2025 for intensive care of the sickest children. That's already too late. Hopefully, if we can intervene early with, for example, vaccination, right? We were asking for vaccination for mothers to prevent pertussis in the newborn. Yeah. Influenza, even in mothers, to prevent influenza in the newborn. So I think 1.5% of the budget for kids is a crime.
It's insufficient. Dr. Musa, thank you so much for speaking with us today and shedding some much needed light on this issue. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
That was consultant pediatrician Dr. Musa Nordin wrapping up this episode of Consider This. I'm Melissa Idris signing off for the evening. Thank you so much for watching and good night.